Before I turn it over to Julie to start the panel, we're going to show a really brief video. We're working with a filmmaker, Christy Bodie of Moxicran, who's putting together 4 short films to give you a little snapshot into our program. So this first video actually features Julie. So if you don't know who Julie Sullivan is already, it'll give you a little bit more background about her and her role in our program, as well as a snapshot into what life is like for mentors and apprentices in our program. So Lynn, I'll turn it over to you.
I certainly didn't know anything about ranching when I arrived. But that thing about asking the questions collectively and recognizing that we're going to learn more, learn faster if we're doing it as a community rather than as individuals.
The smell is like dirty socks, but the flavor is...
And it definitely feeds into how I approach mentoring.
I didn't know that it was edible.
My gift has been to be able to articulate to other people that relationship between animals and land and water and soil. And we're learning every day about all those things.
One of the reasons why we started the new agrarian program with Quivira was because Quivira asked us to. Their mission around land health and finding the intersection of wildlands and working lands and looking for the commonality between people who were ranchers and people who considered themselves conservationists. They came to a realization that I had come to earlier in my life as well, which is that I wasn't going to save 1 acre of wildland and I wasn't going to save 1 member of a species if humans didn't figure out how to feed themselves in a way that was restorative to the planet. There was this real desire to figure out, well, who's the next generation? And if the next generation isn't going to be blood family, it's going to be family of the heart and soul. It's an 8 months commitment to one another. So it's a really intense and relatively intimate relationship where you're working together all of the time and you're bound to drive each other nuts. Mentors are giving a tremendous amount to a young person. And so they're making this deep investment. How can their time with you on your site and their time with you as a mentor, as a guide, as a role model, help this young person move forward in who they're meant to be in the world?
From the mentor's point of view, one of the biggest hurdles is to turn stuff over to people. You know, because you've probably been doing this by yourself your whole life. And be patient. It took me a long time to learn patience with people who don't know how to do stuff. I don't know if I'm still perfect, but I'm better, I think. But I learned that the way to have patience is to invest and actually teach. It's 1 step at a time. You build on that every day. And as you're going through your day, the thing that we'll be watching for as a mentor is a teaching moment. To stop and explain what it is you're doing or what you're seeing. Look at the way this water is running across this land. Look at what plants are here. Why are they here? Talking about that kind of stuff, and you're standing right there in the middle of it. Those are really powerful, easy moments to work with.
And I think one of the things the apprentices really helped me learn is that it's human nature to notice when things don't go well, to notice where the problems are. And so one of the things that being a mentor helps me do is notice what's going right. And that sort of changes your approach to your own life. They're constantly helping us function in the 21st century, helping us think creatively. I think that one of the things that happens when you do something for a long period of time is you have a tendency to discount new ideas. They're helping us grow and change and try on things that we otherwise would have dismissed or felt we were too tired and too old and too worn out to try.
Very often, both the apprentice and the mentor are going to change their views on a lot of things by the time they get done. It's not going to be quite the way they were in the beginning, and that's a beautiful thing. I really feel like that this Some of what we're doing is a model for people to literally change the way agriculture is done on a huge scale. And it has to be done on a huge scale if we're going to reduce our impacts to the environment and the atmosphere and all of those things. But it also has to change if we're going to have rural communities that survive. It's got to be more people back on the land directly and in charge of their own lives with some abilities to maneuver in a changing world. And for me, it's what we want to do every day, and I think it's doable. I think we can. If I didn't, I couldn't get up in the morning.
Can you all hear me? Did I turn this on? Good. Okay. When Courtney White, who was the executive director of Kivira in its founding, first proposed creating the new agrarian program, it was not only to connect the older generation and the younger generation to pass on knowledge and train that next generation as food producers and land stewards, but it was also to nurture the next generation of leaders and change agents as they envision and want to enact agricultural and food systems as they should be, as they could be, as we want them to be, and as we need them to be in order to live in harmony with our planet. That said, the hurdles that beginning agrarians face are enormous and they're disheartening, even when the passion and commitment is great. So we asked the 6 second-year new agrarian apprentices to share their reflections, their fears, their asks, as they continue in this commitment to life, work, and a vision. So we gave them some prompts, but we didn't tell them they had to stick with that. And the prompts fell into 3 different categories, and then we just sort of let them loose and did not censor what they're going to say today to you all. So the categories were, what's hard? What makes you feel you can't continue in this? What keeps you going? And lastly, what is your hope for how it could be? So let me introduce the 6 people who have deeply impacted me over the last 2 years. Lauren Lees, who did her first year at Richards Ranch in California, her second year at Western Slopes in Colorado. Charlie Abbott, who did 2 years on Indraland Ranch in Montana. Nina Jenson, who did her first year at XK Bar Ranch in Colorado, second year at Trinchera Blanca Ranch in Colorado. Leah Pinkner, 2 years on the Moe Ranch in Montana. Jesse Pinkner, 2 years on the Moe Ranch in Montana. And Shannon Maes, who did her first year at Sol Ranch in New Mexico, and her second year with George and I at San Juan Ranch. You're on, Lauren.
I'll try this. Okay. Well, finding a stable career has not really been part of the program. I went to university, got a degree, and then have ever since been bouncing from one exciting idea to the next with some kind of vague concept of future permanence. I went to college with the express intent of doing something to save the world, being part of a solution. However, when your degree is in international development, the focus lies in countries far afield from our domestic affairs. And it was finally within the realm of agriculture that my ideals and drive found a resting place. A place that provided work and lifestyle that I loved, with potential for tangible effects with wide-reaching impact. Once I caught the fever, all I wanted was to be working on large scales, impacting ecosystem health for better function, and utilizing livestock to do it. All the while producing nutrient-dense food? What a win-win! And then I spent several years trying to get a foot in the door. I had no idea how difficult it would prove to be. I flew places, I visited people, I made phone calls, I wrote so many emails, and I found lots of encouragement, but an opportunity for someone like me? They'll think on it. I was already 30 and didn't feel that I had several years to spend working my way up the ladder from ranch newbie or to take a summer job to see if I liked it. No, I was looking for a progressive operation where I could get an immersive experience learning grazing for land health. I had a decade of agricultural experience. Surely I was hireable. But it turned out that to start speaking to someone about ranch cows was like hearing another language. I knew nothing. You calve once a year and it's in the dead of winter? And you go check them at what hours of the night? Ranching isn't economically viable? And this is an industry of the American ideal? I know ranchers. How are they all losing money? I was a cultural outsider, and still am. It's a sentiment that I have heard since from people my age who want to be involved in forward-thinking ranching or animal agriculture, but believe they'll never be accepted or respected by the culture. And who wants to be a part of that? I didn't. However, I wanted to find a loophole. I believed it was there. I wanted so badly for the chance to be a positive agent of change in this regenerative ranching space. I could feel with an extremely rare certainty that this was and is my path. Lucky for me, Quivira offered that entry point. Last year in Eastern California on the Richards Ranch, and this year in Western Colorado with grasslands. I have been accepted, educated, and valued. I have found mentors that treat me with respect despite being a woman from a non-ranching background. And in all of this, I am lucky. During my campaign to enter the regenerative ranching space, I was periodically assailed by fears that the work would be monotonous and boring, that the culture of exclusivity, workaholism, and sexism would leave me isolated and unfulfilled. I like to travel, eat Middle Eastern food, and go to museums. Would those parts of me be whittled away until all that remained was a single facet of my personality and being? My body broken and childless because there was never any time for anything else? Well, I'm happy to report that the work is not boring, and only occasionally monotonous. As land stewards and animal husbanders, we're working on the micro and macro levels and everything in between in terms of observation and management to let nature function her best. We're raising nutrient-dense food on land that has co-evolved with grazers and needs that relationship to effectively cycle nutrients, water, energy, and biota. We're trying to learn and amplify the language of the land. It is complex and challenging and so engaging. I have found refuge from the culture of machismo and pridefully endless and grueling workdays in mentors who have hobbies outside of leatherworking, who take time off for extracurricular activities, who are deeply involved in their children's lives, and who are level-headed, compassionate human beings. They allow me to feel seen and accepted in a culture in which I exist as an outlier. When I ponder the pressing issues in this field, it is the need for widespread adoption that comes first to mind. But instead of policy or incentive programs, I immediately get stuck on the people side of it. There is a desperate need within ranching and the larger culture for bright young people to be involved in continuing the tradition of land stewardship and connection, with an open mind to progressive practices to address the major degradation of natural resources and climate viability. We can't affect the millions of acres we need if we don't have the people on board to do it. Before we can have effective, sustained practice, we need buy-in. To have buy-in, we need to offer a culture of acceptance, humility, and compassion. And for such a culture to exist, we need to be practicing showing up as good humans every day. We need acceptance, humility, and compassion for ourselves as well as others. We all have 10,000 excuses for poor behavior, but excuse or not, the end result is the same. To be affecting positive change on the land, we need to be affecting positive change on people.
I had the pleasure of attending the Ranching for Profit School last January. I expected to learn about better business management, livestock and land management, and how to tie it all together to ultimately make a profitable farm or ranch. What I didn't expect was how much of the school was going to be about people management. During the breaks between sessions, I would hear the same lines being muttered between ranchers that I've too often heard. You just can't find good help. or these young people just don't want to work anymore. These statements kind of confuse me because I'm a part of a community of dozens of young people that are not only some of the most hardworking people I've ever met, but they're educated and deeply passionate about agriculture with a desire to invest their lives into land and producing good food. To me, the contrast begs the question, is the problem a shortage of good labor, or is it a shortage of good people to work for? Seems to me that most ranchers view their labor as a burdensome overhead, and a quick look at any balance sheet would confirm that. In years past, farmers and ranchers had children and neighbors to help fill the void of good help. Many farmers and ranchers, but we all know the statistics about the rising average age of farmers and their children who are leaving and not returning. After 2 years in the new Agrarian program, after speaking to many apprentices from 3 generations of apprenticeship in this program and many other young people that I've met that are new to farming and ranching, I've noticed that many of us are figuring out why the children of farmers and ranchers left their farms and ranches. Most ranches pay very little, demand long hours and long weeks. They don't offer benefits of any kind. They use internships and apprenticeships as guises just to get cheap labor. They use phrases like, if you think the way I'm treating you is bad, you should have seen the way my dad treated me. Or, if you're burnt out, maybe you're just not cut out for this. So how do we fix this massive labor problem in a way that brings young people into agricultural and rural spaces and keep them there? What carried me through my years of apprenticeship and the years I dabbled in agriculture before that was good community. It was the chicken harvests and with friends, evenings at the bar, playing music with neighboring ranch hands, sharing meals, and always talking about agriculture and managing land in better ways. If we started to invest into young people and think about our investment into them in the same ways we think about soil health or stockmanship, we might begin to see more young people sticking around. If we expect young people to get into agriculture and stay in it, we're going to have to manage them well. That means we have to pay them fair wages, give them opportunities to create lives of their own, and develop community, give them access to land, and build them up. If we're going to have interns and apprentices, we have to actually teach them and give them opportunities to move beyond those positions. We have to give room for mistakes and growth and opportunities to grow into the future of ranch managers without expecting them to be ready-made. As important as it is that we learn how to farm and ranch in sustainable and regenerative ways, I think it's more important that the people in agriculture learn how to manage people in sustainable and regenerative ways.
This seems to be a career that requires one to completely integrate their life into work in a way that leaves little space or energy for other interests and relationships. It has felt like I've had to choose between 2 parts of myself that make me whole. Choosing between work that is fulfilling or having relationships and developing other skills and interests. I have guilt for even thinking about wanting more. We do this because we love it, not because it makes money. This is a common phrase thrown around this circle. While ultimately it is true for this group of values-driven people, it also seems like a resignation to that's just the way it is, or even used as a justification for not paying people. My biggest heartache in agriculture is seeing several close friends, the ones that inspired me to stay in agriculture, leave it themselves, simply because they couldn't find a viable future, not because they didn't love the work enough. The most unsettling part is the numbness by broader society, the seeming inability to value people as part of the food system, and see this work as legitimate. On the surface, it seems so simple, caring for land and animals while producing nourishing food. How can this not be appreciated? I'm starting to realize why it is easier to look away. My dad and many aunts and uncles all left agriculture and didn't look back, until now. I think as they age, they are wistful and are starting to look back. Talking to them, I can hear parts of that life clinging to their hearts. But loving land and animals did not mean loving agriculture for them. I say all of this because there is a culture in farming and ranching that takes pride in being tough, persistent, and gritty. A pride in working for little money, doing work that not just anyone can handle. While I appreciate those traits that enable people to be resilient, and yes, they can be cultivated through hard work, the stress, burnout, and depression that are left in the wake are less acknowledged. What I'm struck by is how this attitude can be a bit self-destructive to the future of this industry. It is a righteousness that is used as leverage to discount other jobs and industries as well. I notice myself even thinking this way at times. Why do we take pride in working so hard for an industry that doesn't support us? We can't love our work to death. Many of us believe that food shouldn't be expensive, but effectively we are not valuing ourselves enough to make a living. A prove-it attitude and culture that values work at the expense of all else drives new people away, makes us question if we have what it takes, and still wants women to prove themselves twice as much. What leaves me in disbelief is these very people are the ones willing to continue the future. It would be a mistake to paint this as the whole picture, as there are many incredible people building the trail I took to get here today, and took a chance on me. I hope to take their lead and leave the rest behind. Many people, particularly other apprentices, inspire me to keep going. This year, I worked with one cowboy in particular who reminded me why I don't want to look away. Not because of any profound words, but simply his openness to working with anyone. He didn't need to know how many times I had been kicked. Showing up was enough. He takes pride in the most mundane work, a joke in hand, without trying to prove anything to anyone. A kind of genuineness that reminds me of parts of myself I want to cultivate. I know he has hard days where he questions what he does. However, what I have realized is that his warm attitude is what makes him an effective land manager. He draws people in, he builds trust, facilitates collaboration. He gives me hope that we can start to value and cultivate other traits in ranchers and farmers beyond grit and toughness. I think my biggest challenge going forward is to unlearn this mindset and put my hopes for all of us into practice.
Hello. My heart's beating really hard, so I'm sorry if I... Does anybody want to breathe with me for a hot second? Like in through the nose on a 4 count, out through the mouth on a 6 count? Right. Since the start of my apprenticeship last March, I've learned a lot about regenerative ranching, but more so about myself. For one, I thought that I could be far away from my family. On the contrary, I realized after almost 1 year that the distance and lack of ability to visit was unsustainable and pretty detrimental. Not having the comfort of our family made it easy to fall into a deep hole. What drove me into that hole was feeling unvalued, unhelpful, not good enough, unimportant, and generally like a screw-up, to the point that I believed that I was all of that, and I didn't have value. I was too stubborn to take ownership of my part in that, and I didn't help myself either. I didn't reach out because I've been conditioned not to. When I've shared difficult emotions in the past, they've been met with anger and invalidation, but every so often with validity. We didn't hug our family for 8.5 months. When we were finally descending on our plane ride before getting to see them, I couldn't stop myself from crying, much like now. I couldn't believe that I made it through. The good news is I have climbed out of that hole, even if I'm just a mess today. Perhaps the hardest lesson I've learned is that I feel I've failed my second year of apprenticeship. Last year, I learned that I'm very uncomfortable with failure, and I set a goal to get more comfortable with it. Instead, I avoided it by not taking accountability, putting myself out there, or putting in effort to better communicate. I thought that not fixing my own problems was only hurting myself, and it ended up hurting others. I have taken accountability for that. I wish I could have done it 5 months sooner than I did. I have learned or relearned some things. I have value, for one. I'm no longer participating in spaces where my value is not seen, appreciated, and utilized. I'm practicing focused breathing, thank you for doing that with me, and bilateral stimulation as tools to help me ground. The hard part is keeping myself in check to practice those things before I slip or dig myself further. I've also learned that having the hard conversations aren't as bad as I may perceive them to be. Like Linda said yesterday, life is short and there's no time to be wasted. It's the reason I became an apprentice. I often think back to the times before my apprenticeship and can see my past self being shocked at who I am now, what I've learned, what I'm doing, and where I'm going. What fundamentally drives me to persist in my life and career is my vision for the future. At this point in time, it's very hard to see how all of humanity will wake up and make changes. What I can envision is Jesse, my husband, and I and our family happy, raising livestock and hopefully an orchard, growing our own food, sharing meals, regenerating the land we have access to, continually learning, striving to be better people all the time, and hopefully teaching the next generation how to respect land, life, and all beings. My grandpa Richard had this quote hanging in the wall of his office and stamped into all of his books. I shall pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. There's 2 things in this quote that I wish for: a sense of urgency and treating people with dignity. Can't see. My third wish would be for you all to not only think about what changes you can make to keep us from going past the point of no return, but to actually go out and do them. Do not look to my generation as the one who's going to save us. We need action, not even now, but yesterday. You're here now. You're in positions of power. You can make changes and you can do something.
Reflecting over the past 2 years, people I've met, places I've seen, and lifelong friends I've made, it seems impossible to boil it all down to one presentation. But the long and short of what I've learned is that the reasons we all, the new agrarian apprentices, decided to attempt to change the world through agriculture are largely the same. Coming into regenerative agriculture as a blank slate, I admit that I was pretty naive during my first 8 months as an apprentice. And while regenerative agriculture seems to us, at least, as one of the main ways we can help change the world, I realize now that there are some pretty immense hurdles in front of us. As new agrarians, we face issues such as access to land, livable wages, sustainable work-life balance, and an ever-changing environment head-on. And these are only a few of the issues that we are forced to look at every single day. Other issues like government policy and big business regulations are issues that it almost seems like we don't have the time or energy for. But after living and working on the same ranch for 2 years, I realized that's nothing new. That's the same sentiment that agricultural producers have had for many years now. The systemic oppression of working people to benefit large corporations, taking the means of production away from the producers, is the heart of the issue for every small family-run agricultural business I have ever encountered. So how can we afford to implement new and potentially risky stewardship practices into our businesses when our business can no longer support a family in the same way it did 50 years ago? But then again, with the impending environmental implications, how can we afford not to? The way I see it, we are quickly entering a new era of systemic oppression, one where we rely heavily on agricultural businesses to provide food for the masses and change the climate for the better, all while not granting these businesses any further equity in the system they are helping to change. To me, a consumer-based economy couldn't get more messed up than this, but that's what Upton Sinclair thought when he wrote The Jungle in 1906. I know that this is a heavy way to start in on a reflection like this, but there is something really important happening here. My eyes have been open these past 2 years as to how we can tackle these issues, and I am convinced that we are building the tools to do so. To me, nothing is more powerful than communication. By not participating in a mutually beneficial and open discussion, you are supporting the machine of economic and social oppression. And when it comes to the obvious political affiliations associated with rural and urban communities, this is what they want. They want us to stay at home, not to try to understand our neighbors' hardships, and to keep fighting each other rather than come together. When I moved to 2. Montana, population of 26, from St. Louis, Missouri, population of 305,000, I obviously had some preconceived notions on who the people were that I would be calling my neighbors. The reality, however, was that I have never experienced a greater sense of community than during my time living in 2. Montana. This is a wonderful place where being someone's neighbor means so much more than just sharing property lines. It means that everyone is invited to the Christmas party, everyone is invested in the well-being of their community, and more often than not, people are willing to participate in alternative forms of economy. More and more, it seems like these small community-based food systems are the only equitable way forward, a way for people to have fulfillment in their personal and professional lives, a way for people to have their needs met and meet the needs of others, and maybe even a way for people to change the world. Now, I'm not painting this picture to try and convince more people to move to 2. Montana. In fact, the exact opposite. I'm trying to highlight the reasons why it might be healthier for you, your family, and the environment if you move to a different small town, invest in the local economy, and try to fill a need for a community you may have never seen yourself in before. At the same time, here's my advice to small community members. Be open-minded. We all love to sit at the one bar in town and chat all night long, but regardless of which city someone has migrated from, they are not a threat to your way of life. They are potentially the person you will be calling the next time that you need help. As a transplant from the city to a rural environment, and after 2 years of life in 2. I feel like it's my purpose to help bridge this gap between people, because in my mind, once we all see that everyone we meet has 80% in common, we will be able to tackle all of the issues I've been talking about as a community. Ultimately, what inspires me to continue to struggle with these issues on a daily basis is the new agrarians that I've met through this program. We all have experienced unsustainable ways to exist in agriculture, and no one I know in this program has any of the answers to these issues, but we are all committed to the struggle. We all understand that the only way to help change the environment and the political powers that be is to get down in the dirt with the people who are already there trying. Until we have all experienced this level of discomfort, I can't see how one can make a case for truly understanding the plight of working people. My advice to anyone wanting to find a way to help change the problems they see in this world is get dirty. Start struggling alongside the people and animals you want to help. Know their problems, and then try and change the system. And ultimately, that's what gives me hope. I've never met a group of dirtier people than the new Agrarians.
On that note, hello. The past 2 years have been empowering, transformative, inspiring, and full of extraordinary beauty. I have more skills, abilities, and a deeper understanding of what it means to live with others and with the land than I used to think possible. But there have also been serious and real challenges. One of the first hardest things was finding a job on a ranch using regenerative practices. For over a year, through endless web searches, cold calls, emails, applications, interviews, my family and friends teased me that I worked harder to get hired on a ranch than I did to go to the college of my choice, and it's true. Then there was actually summoning the courage to change my life, challenge common sense in some ways, by choosing to follow a path in agriculture in my homeland, the drought-stricken Southwest, then going from being valued as someone with skill and experience in my work to being almost a total beginner and making lots of embarrassing mistakes, being transplanted into a new community, suddenly having much less control over my own time, my living situation, my work-life balance. On top of that were new money worries because of earning so little income, getting used to working long hours, weeks and months being both too busy and too tired for too long. The heavy sadness of animal suffering and occasional death, and then a surprising one, how difficult it can be to relate to family and friends not in agriculture. The dominant culture of agriculture reinforces existing social injustice in the same way the rest of society does, devaluing people based on class, gender, race, origin, background, and ability, among other aspects of what makes us who we are. For example, ranching neighbors and the brand inspector speaking only to my male coworkers or boss while ignoring me completely or speaking about me as though I wasn't there, as well as folks making assumptions about my skill set or interests because I'm a woman. And there's an attitude within agriculture that says I may never quite belong because I was raised in a big city, this city actually. These things hurt and make me angry, not just for myself, but for all of us. I know my experience is not unique, and I know we can do better. A related issue is the difference in access to healthy local food and land, among other important things, that's based on race and wealth. Why is there no farmer's market or health food store in some towns while others enjoy many sources of fresh local food? Why is most rural land owned by white folks? As a producer, why is it so hard to feed our own communities first, our own families even, and still make a living? Looking ahead to the career in agriculture that I'm working to create, the things that scare me the most for myself and for others on a similar path are burnout, high financial, physical, and emotional risk, and the possibility that we may not see this system change as quickly as we all need it to. What keeps me going is that I love the closeness and connection with the land and with animals that I get to feel every day. I love raising beautiful, healthy food for people in the best way I can, and I truly love the coworkers and this community that I'm beginning to find who collectively inspire me even more. I'm deeply grateful for everyone in my life who has been so supportive, for the people who have hired and mentored me, for the friends I've met who are on similar paths, for everyone who's committed to building their life around caring for the land and water and feeding people, and for all the good things that haven't happened yet, but which we are so committed to bringing into being. My hope for myself is that in skill, knowledge, care, sweat, and joy, I can be one of many who are carrying forward the best of old traditions and blending them with responsiveness to the needs of the present. My hope for all of us is that we're headed for a future of connection and reconnection, as that's the biggest piece missing right now. This means a future where everyone is closely tied in some way to the land we live on, the natural and cultural history of that land with its unique needs and strengths, the food we eat, the community that surrounds each of us, and the knowledge and skill that makes all of this possible. This is a future with abundant, healthy, affordable local food access for all, where small to medium scale ethical, traditional, and regenerative agriculture is an economically viable career, and a calling that's both equally and more accessible to everyone, in which rural communities also thrive. Every person is valued equally, and the whole of the living world around us, including land, animals, water, and people, are all held in reverence.
Said, can you hear me? Okay. They've said that they're open to questions. But before we do that, I had one thing I wanted to say, which is a couple of years ago, I co-presented at a workshop with someone who shared something that has deeply and profoundly impacted me, which is they said, every entity, but certainly every agricultural entity, is based on 3 systems. It has 3 systems that it absolutely must have in order to thrive. One is a production system. Most farmers and ranchers have a lot of resources at their disposal that they seek out in order to figure out what to grow, how to grow it, and why it's going to thrive. The second system is a financial system. Once you have something that you're raising and you raise it well, you want to turn it into some money so you can make a living. Most of us have resources, financial resources that we seek out and cultivate. The third system we all depend on is the one we don't pay any attention to until it goes awry, and that's the relational system. And I think one of the things that struck me so deeply, hearing what these 6 have shared, is how important it is that we pay attention to the people, to people's hearts and souls in this work. So with that, I think we're open for questions.
We also have our first question from the virtual audience. So this came through Zoom.
Hold on, Leah. If you're a live person here with us, you're live on virtual also, but can you raise your hands because I'll run a mic to you while Leah's asking this question.
Yeah, that's very preparatory. I appreciate that. All right, the question here is, land price is such a huge barrier to entry to ranching agriculture. In Colorado, our wild ranching spaces have become vulnerable to development. We're losing our ranches and our ranchers. What do the agrarian graduates and youth need or desire to overcome this barrier, to protect the land and water, and to pass it to the next 7 generations? Land cooperatives with reinvestment, sharecropping. Is there a better way to lower the bar to entry? And can people help with a little land or a little cash? Can they help you guys?
Yes. Yeah, I think what a lot of us said, access to land and opportunities to try things, and is what we all need, and we're all passionate about it and want to do it. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we learn in Ranching for Profit too is like this. A lot of what we learn in Ranching for Profit too is this generational divide, and looking at the way people view what they're leaving behind for their children, and that this is essentially like a pioneering spirit, right? That we're all committed to this kind of work. So the ability to try new things, like Charlie said, and experiment and fail, and then build on our failures.
I just want to quickly add that I think, there's so much room for solutions here in this arena. Like any creative thing that we can collectively come up with, like the sky's the limit. We could make it happen. There's a lot of transition happening right now in land and water. That's so important. And there's so many people that are really interested in doing this work, and it's all about that connection. And actually like giving people who want to do this work the opportunity to try it. And then from there, just figuring out like what's gonna work in each situation, what's gonna work in each community, what's gonna work for each person.
Okay, this isn't really a question so much as a word of encouragement. One of my mentors handed down to me a phrase, and it was Latin, and I don't know if it's a fact that it's truly Latin, but it's called e pluribus non carborundum, which means don't let the bastards grind you down.
Comments? I think Leah's got another hand, and if folks want to keep their hands in the air, I'll bring a mic to the next person.
Yes, I would like to talk about the bastards. Yes, I know that, and I use that frequently. It's still hard.
Okay, I have a question for the ladies. I'm a young woman in agriculture, and I just want to know what really keeps you going, because I'm barely 20 and I already feel burnt out, and it's just, how do you keep going?
I would say what comes to mind to me is a conversation I had with Miss Amber Smith, who is here today, from Women in Ranching. And we were talking about the need for change and looking to mentors and trying to find inspiration. And she said to me, like, I spent a lot of time looking for that, and at some point I realized, like, I can be that person, and I need to be that person. And now she is that person to a lot of people. And so for me, when I'm struggling plenty of those days, I guess I try to channel that and look at the struggles I'm having and know that there's plenty of other people doing the same thing, and it's only going to get better if I persevere and try to make space for everybody else to persevere as well.
I love that question. I love that you asked it, because I think something that I've certainly found to be true, and I think a lot of us in this program have is that, you know, community does so much in terms of inspiring us and helping us understand where we fit in this continuum of people that have come before us making positive change and people that will come after us too. So I would say, like, having a support system, having people you can talk to on a daily basis that inspire you. And yes, shout out to the Women in Ranching community. Getting involved with that group is really a powerful, powerful thing.
Do a girls' night. That's just the essence of it, like all women supporting women.
What I'd like to add is that women need men to be advocates for women. We had a male apprentice a number of years ago who actually had feminism as part of his holistic goal. And I'm going to shout you out here, George, a little bit. One time when George came in and was going to have Paul go out and work on a tractor or something, Paul said, no, let's get Martha. Like, we need that.
I just also want to add to that last quickly, you know, making time for yourself to rest, really important.
Thank you.
So I know coming back from Kentucky, it's kind of hard coming into agriculture with no background, like into that culture and whatnot. And I know you guys said it's kind of hard to get into ranching the same way with having no background in that area. Have you guys had any different experiences coming into ranching with some agricultural background versus none at all? Because I know some of you all come from research and lab work versus coming from working on family farms and whatnot.
Yeah, I think what's important to remember here is that your perspective coming from whatever background you have is really valid to a ranching, farming, food production operation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of transferable skills in many different jobs, especially if you have a little bit of experience in agriculture, but sometimes you have to connect the dots for somebody and kind of advocate for how those skills might be relevant.
And it might sound kind of corny, but I've heard people say over and over again, enthusiasm and passion make up for so much. So, you might not know anything, but if you're gung-ho, people are gonna love you.
Hi, this is for everyone. I think one thing that's unique about what Quivira does is they mentor mentors. So for all the apprentices, what work would you like to see mentors doing in order to better serve young people wanting to do this work?
There are a lot of people that look to programs like this as an opportunity to get cheap labor, and that's a sad but very real truth. And I think it was something Julie said to me at one point, which was being a mentor in a program like this doesn't take away work from your day. It probably actually adds to it. So understanding that when you take in young people like us, it's a big investment, and it's not just a opportunity for you to get some help on your ranch. That is a side benefit, and all of the people in this program are super hardworking and bring a lot to the table. So farmers and ranchers certainly receive that benefit, but there is, you have to invest in us if you're going to take us on. That's super important. And I think there's understanding on our end as well that most of these ranchers aren't particularly good right out the gate at being a mentor. So there's understanding from our end too that they're learning how to be mentors, and that takes a long time. So yeah.
I think as far as specifics for Leah and myself to actually get into agriculture, we had no context until we got into this program, but Shane's given us a lot of equity in the ranch itself. Yeah, is that better? All right. Yeah, so Shane's given us a lot of chance in equity in the ranch itself, like opportunity to run our own business and expand our enterprises and stuff. So that's giving us value and actually wanting to stay there, and investment in our own local food system. So yeah, the picture you're looking at here is at the Mo Ranch, and Shane's the wide-brimmed hat man on the right. So shout out to Shane.
One simple thing would be you're trying to set some clear boundaries with your apprentice and then hold to those yourself. I'm speaking to mentors here, and I think that's especially hard for people to do that have been working by themselves for a while or in a family operation where, maybe things are looser or they've run differently, but just keeping in mind that, your apprentice or your intern is working in a job capacity. So for them, their day maybe looks a little bit different than a mentor's day in terms of like the single-minded focus that they will be giving to their job. Come back to me.
Then we might not have time for the one last. Anyway, one thing I tell mentors all the time is that you may get more done in your day, but your apprentice is working 5 times harder than you are because they're learning how to do something. There are multiple studies that learning how to do something you don't already know how to do well takes 5 times the cognitive and emotional energy that it takes to do something you know how to do. So as a mentor, you need to remember that at the end of the day, they might have gotten a lot less done, but they worked harder than you did.
I just want to add, trying to meet people where they're at. You know, everyone's coming from a different background, and what brings us to do work like this is really sincere passion and interest. But as Charlie said, we're not ready-made.
Last one, former NAPA apprentice here. One of the things that I struggled with in my apprenticeship was bringing my full self to work every day. I'm a queer woman, and so question for all of you is just a few words about having the courage to bring your full self to work in the communities that we work in every day.
I think for me, it's really the people component. The access we have to the other young agrarians is pretty amazing, and the ability to lean on each other. I know that my view is kind of narrow because I'm lucky enough to have an amazing partner that supports me every day as well. So, but yeah, I think the community component is huge.
It's really hard. I think that is one of, like, a continued question of how to be accepted if you do show all the sides of yourself that might not be as familiar to some communities. But I think that, like, seeing other people do it, everybody here, everyone who spoke, encourages a lot of that.
I think it's a process. I think it's something that's evolving. I think having supportive people around you is really essential.
Yeah, I'll just second that the community of other apprentices around me and former apprentices that lived near where I was working were what allowed me to fully be myself, because they are the ones that accepted me fully for who I am and encouraged me and allowed me to bounce ideas off of and all of that. So.
Well, I think we're at time. So, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Not done yet. Yeah. So in just a moment, I'm going to invite the rest of our 2022 apprentices up here for our graduation ceremony. Before we do that, however, I just want to share a couple things. First, if you are a young person who's out there or you know someone who might be interested in apprenticeship, our applications for the 2023 season just opened, so you can go on Quivira's website to learn about the mentor ranches that are hiring and the application process. Also, there are no better people to talk to than our apprentices who are here, if that's something that you're considering. And for everyone else who's out in the audience, I really hope that for the remainder of time that we have today during the conference, that you'll take a moment to talk with one of our apprentices. They are such incredibly dedicated, hardworking people. I know they're an inspiration to this community, and they also carry a huge weight on their shoulders. And they have a lot of really important things to share and to say, and you've heard some of that from our second-year apprentices. We also have, I think, 17 other first-year apprentices who are here today. Also, before we bring them down, I just want to acknowledge, I know we have some alumni and mentors in the room, so if you are a NAP mentor or a NAP alumni, I'd like you to please stand up wherever you are so we can give you a quick round of applause. So this program wouldn't exist without all of our mentors, and we're now at the point where we have over 100 alumni in the program and growing by about 20 every year. I also know that there's a lot of folks out there who are involved in mentoring the next generation. So if you are a mentor or a teacher in some other capacity, would like you to stand up. All right, and now I'm going to ask all of our apprentices to come on down to the stage here. And so this is a chance for those of you in the audience to see who they are. And in just a moment, I'll be reading their names out so we can hand out their graduation certificates. And so second years, you guys can stand with them. And as you can see, we have quite a few folks up here, so I'm going to ask you to hold your applause till we get to the very end. All right, so our second year apprentices, we have Charlie Abbott from Indralin Ranch. Nina Jenson from Trinchera Blanca. Lauren Lees at Western States. Shannon Maes at San Juan Ranch. Leah Pinkner at Moe Ranch. Leah Pinkner at Moe Ranch. Alex Bejarano at B-Bar. Stevie Joy Bullman at Schultz Ranch. Montana Case at Indralin Ranch. Nick Eddy at Round River Resource Management. Olivia Fitzgerald at Indralin Ranch. Morgan Gilbert at Knott Land and Livestock. Henry Harrington at Western States. Cyrus Johnson at Sather Farm and Ranch. Tyler Liu at Villicus Farms. Chris Morrow at Hay Creek Ranch. Hannah Mae Miller at Drzezinski Ranch. Chelsea Moe at B-Bar. Tess Palmer at Rafter W. Mimi Rabine at Charter Ranch. Carlisle Stewart at Milton Ranch. Rachel Stoltzfus at Round River Resource Management. And Jaylee Weir at Barthelmess Ranch. All right. Now you guys can help each other.